Hey, this is part 2 of Jack's List with Landscape Resources. So let's get into the nitty-gritty on why landscaping is so important when it comes to buying and selling real estate. If we're thinking from a seller's perspective and just looking around town, what are the things that people aren't doing before they list that they really should be doing before they're trying to attract a buyer?
Yeah, I think, and this is brought up in part one that we went over, a seller is not going to spend the money that a buyer will on a prospective landscape because they're not going to be there any longer.
Yep.
So I feel like a lot of sellers kind of cheap out when they come to, okay, well, let's just do the necessity to get it,
Good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good enough to sell. On what price we want. Now, there are extenuating circumstances where you get higher end clients to go, no, I want to redo the whole property because I'm selling it for $10 million.
Yep.
But that's few and far between.
Yep.
But what we see is, the sod isn't taken care of properly. It's majority of your footprint of your lot is sod.
And patchy, and you can see through
Exactly.
to the roots. Yep.
So having that, looking up to par is critical. Secondary is plant health, the way it's trimmed, all of that. If it's not properly cleaned out, thinned out, dead, kind of fallen out from certain places, that can be off-putting to a prospective buyer.
Yeah, and certainly, again, going back to the first showing always happens online, it's something I emphasize heavily with my sellers where once they call me or I go, all right, maybe we consider paint is huge. Maybe we consider painting and staging and doing this, that, and the other. We can do that pretty quickly. The thing you guys need to jump on fast is getting the landscaping because often it takes more time. Clearing out the dead stuff, water the heck out of it because if it doesn't look like you have. And I always love those pops of color where depending on the style, but a lot of the homes in town here, they're very clean, to the point where they may not have that focal point, where something pop, again, the pots on either side
Correct.
of that. And speaking from a buyer's perspective, I have my thoughts on this. What should buyers be looking out for? Because I feel like buyers often put so much emphasis on the structure, the house itself, they really don't consider the landscaping as much as they should. What should they be looking for?
Yeah, so my biggest thing, and through past experience and through experience of our clients, the irrigation system is so expensive to put in nowadays.
Yep.
And to rip it up and redo it is even more expensive because then you're ripping up your landscaping. So having, if it's a shallow well, making sure the shallow well, has adequate water still in it if it needs to be re-drilled, all of that. Making sure your pumps are good, up to date, it's enough pump for the system that you want, stuff like that, the age of it. And then, if you can, or you have history on, okay, maybe when was the last time that the irrigation system's been renovated or something like that, having a general idea of the age of the install is, crucial in my perspective.
And going back to what we were just off air talking about, the importance of the inspector, where I can't wait to have my go-to inspector in on this. And that's one thing I'm sure we'll talk about, that he's the person who's going to turn on the irrigation, make sure the pumps work and the different zones work and there aren't broken heads, because that can get so expensive so quickly.
Absolutely. And, from my experience a year and a half ago when, we went through this process with me, you brought in your go-to guy and he was extremely thorough in everything that he did. And he pointed out things to me that I would never in a million years catch. Because I am overwhelmed as a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, it's a frenzy.
I don't know what's going on.
Yep.
I'm just trying to survive the process, basically.
Yep.
And having you as a real estate agent that knows what they're doing, have an inspector that knows what they're doing, really brings a lot of peace in that process. And especially when you got a wife that is asking you all these questions, I'm like, I'll ask Jack.
Just call Jack. Get in the group chat.
Exactly.
And shout out Kyler Davis with Core
Yes.
Dimensions. I already talked to him about shooting an episode.
He
I can't
needs
wait.
to.
That
Absolutely.
is, from a buyer standpoint, that's one of the most important parts of the process, where And, my side is making sure the house, from a making the decision standpoint, that's my world. Is it the right neighborhood? Does it fit
Right.
all the needs? What can be changed? What can't? From the condition standpoint, that's the inspector. Now, going back to average consumer, we'll try to run through this kind of quick. When we're talking about plants, there's all these different kinds of uses where it may be for privacy or decorative hedges or pops of color. In those different categories of reasons people buy plants, what do you think in Central Florida, our region, are the best types of plants for different uses?
So there's tiers in a landscaping plan that we normally use. The hedges that we use for privacy aren't the most beautiful. They're there for a practical
because they fill
reason.
the most
Exactly.
reasonably priced.
They're a void filler. They block off your neighbors. They create that oasis. They're the walls to the oasis.
Yeah.
Basically.
And if someone wanted to put up a big wall like that cheap, what would be the best plant?
So
you think?
there's a couple of them. The most common, and we see this all over Winter Park, is Podocarpus.
Yeah.
I mean, that's everywhere.
And I personally think they're pretty good looking.
Oh, they're
I
fantastic.
like Podocarpus.
You can leave them loose, but a lot of people keep them trimmed, tight, formal looking, and they look fantastic. They do well. They're very hardy. All of that. So they're a great plant, and they're a great basis for the rest of your design.
Yep.
The next thing is bringing on the second and third tiers. Bringing color in, bringing different textures into the landscaping. There's a lot of green. Right,
it's a lot
in
of green.
Florida.
I ran into that problem, which is why I went hibiscus.
A
just
lot
for
of
those
green
pops.
But there's also a lot of different variations of green, a lot of different greens out there, you know, and when you bring different, color types and textures into the equation, it really gives it that next level feel. So on a perimeter, kind of shrub that we're speaking of, Podocarpus, Collusia, Viburnum's another one. You can do, those are really the main
Big
three
fillers
that we deal with. Podocarpus being 90%.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah, where
absolutely.
I just threw some viburnum at my house where it just grows like a weed.
Oh yeah, it does. It will grow much faster than Podocarpus. It will fill in a lot quicker, and it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, so that's great for privacy. What about, I know it's super popular in Winter Park. Everyone loves their decorative hedges. What are the plants that they're kind of yellow and green umbrella plants?
Yeah, Schefflera.
Schefflera. Where what are, for things like that, where you want the pop of color or really dense, perfectly formed, tailored boxes? What are the most popular for decorative hedges?
So there's a number of them. Azaleas are a big one.
Yep.
A lot of people love the azaleas. They get the seasonal bloom. Stuff like that. You've got on the tropical end, you've got Ixora that has a bloom on it as well. That you can keep it very tidy and neat. You've got the Schefflera, either the Capella or the Trinette. That's mainly
that little
used.
yellow pot. I'm lined in the front of my house with that.
Right.
I love that little pop from all the green with that yellow.
And funny that you say about color, the main thing that people kind of overlook is that in the areas that you want color, there has to be some sort of sunlight in there to get that photosynthesis and all that going.
Or else it doesn't matter.
Or else it won't produce the color. Like, you have a loropetalum with, it's a very dark purple kind of plant. It's a shrub. You can keep it really trimmed and tight. If you have it in an area of mostly shade, over time, it greens out.
Oh, really?
It loses its
the plant
red
physically
pigment
loses the color
in the plant.
I didn't know.
Yes. So when you that's why bringing an LA in or bringing a qualified landscape designer in that knows the long-term life of the plant. Now, all these companies that come in, or I shouldn't say all of them, a vast majority of them that do this kind of work, they're thinking of the here and now, right? They're not thinking of down the road, this is kind of how I want it to look. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's creating, problems for, other companies that take on it down the road, because then the clients are like, well, this is not what I envisioned.
Yeah.
Well, that was the designer
Yeah,
or
the
whoever.
mistake was made years ago.
The landscaper that put it in.
Yeah.
So having someone that knows what they're doing, the certain, this plant can only do well in shade. This plant can only do well in sun, stuff like that. Now, there are exceptions to everything, right?
Yep.
So there are plants that produce blooms in shade like camellias and stuff like that. But the vast majority of color comes from sun.
Yeah. And as far as we have privacy, which I know is a top one, decorative hedges just to line the front of the house, that's super popular. What do you see people use when they just want to add a little bit of life and color and make the front not super boxy?
So we do a lot of our stuff is annuals. Seasonal perennials or annuals. We have clients that have upwards of 4,000 annuals on their property, and just beds and beds,
kidding,
all different colors, all different types, and it's, bringing, different variations into the landscaping that if you get tired of it down the road, you just swap it out.
Yeah. And they're not very pricey.
No, they're not pricey at all. And they don't last forever either. And that's something that you have to tell a client when you bring that into the landscape plan, that these will need to be changed out over time. And it's the lifespan of it is, 6 months, not 6 years or 16 years.
Yeah. And that's something in real estate, we see it all the time in the higher end entrances to communities. They go wild with the annuals. They always play into the theme of the color, or you do that a lot, don't you?
Yeah, well,
yeah. Where that's one thing that, thinking of, Isleworth or Dona or, quite a few different.
Well, it's a stately, here it is.
Yeah,
I mean,
always
it looks
fresh.
good.
It makes a huge, where I would pay HOA dues just to have that entrance.
But the maintenance on it, you have to keep up with it. And they're not really, annuals don't require maintenance. It's the maintenance involved in, they're on their last leg. Let's order a new batch, this and that, and keeping up with the clients that way. So we have clients that change annuals out quarterly. We have clients that change them out semi-annually. And we have clients that have perennials that leave them in there for a year, something like that. So there's all different types. There's other plants that we can put in. We use succulents. We like bromeliads, stuff like that. They do really well in pots. I love them for pots because all of our pots that we do have, irrigation built into them.
Gotcha. My parents have that.
Correct. Yeah, it's an added insurance like we talked about before with the irrigation, but that irrigation could be pinched by the pot. It could be pinched by, a rock in there.
They've had that happen.
Yep,
these beautiful decorative pieces.
Exactly.
Oh, no.
So you put a succulent type of plant in that pot to, if it is more drought hardy than, an annual would be.
Got it. And then, so we've kind of worked down from privacy to decorative hedges to that pop of color. Last but certainly not least, grass. Which grasses do we most often see in town? And in your opinion, if you were resodding, what grass would you go with in town?
So there's mainly two different types, and they all have variants of that type. You've got zoysia and St. Augustine. Zoysia is kind of like a more, it's a smaller leaf. It's meant to be very, very low, cut at, an inch to 2 inches, basically. Then you've got St. Augustine, which, a lot of homes have that in it. And zoysia, for the most part, loves full sun. I mean, it thrives in full sun. When you get it into more shady areas, it can do well. I mean, we have many properties with zoysia with shady areas, but it requires a lot more treatments on it. You have to thin out the trees, and eventually, it will get sparse. It will kind of,
Where that's an issue I run into frequently representing buyers and sellers, whether it's my client's home or what they're looking in, is we have a ton of large oak trees in town, and the grass is just always dead. Is there a type of grass that, let's say if someone buys a house where it's, it's all patchy and gross because it's shade, is there a grass those clients should put in that does better in the shade?
Absolutely. So, like I said, zoysia is not the best for long-term durability, but St. Augustine, there's variants like Citra Blue, Seville, stuff like that you can put in shaded areas that thrive in shaded areas. So there's many different options for types and variants of sod that you can put in that work with, different environments.
Got it. And then last and certainly not least, if I were a plant, what would I be?
Oh, man. This is the hardest question of them all.
I have mine queued up. Do you want to hear mine?
Yes, please do.
So I don't have nearly the depth of knowledge on plants, but I think I have mine nailed down really good.
Okay.
So when we talk about, one of the things that if anyone knows you, they know how accurate what I'm about to say is. And for people who may not know you, one of the things that cracks me up most about your personality is day to day when we're doing stuff like this, you're very calm, you're very relaxed, easygoing. But when we talk about competition and racing, a switch goes off where you're one of the, when we're talking about being a driver, deciding how hard or, relaxed you push, you only go 100% all the time, where when I'm driving, I tend to leave some room for error. If I can't brake as fast as I want, I'm going to brake a little bit early just in case. You don't. You go absolutely to the limit. You risk yourself in the car all the time. You're sliding all four wheels at 100 miles an hour, and you're just an absolute maniac with massive balls. So it's this funny blend of very calm and collected around town and just a tough mofo. So the plant that I've selected for you is, I think you're a hibiscus, because you're incredibly presentable. You have a wide appeal to many different people. Everybody loves a hibiscus, but don't let those pretty flowers fool you, because deep down you're tough as nails. You handle incredibly harsh environments, and you're tough to kill.
Wow.
So I think you're a hibiscus.
That's pretty good. Man.
I thought a lot about this.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Holy cow. All right. So let me think on mine. I would probably say you are most. Man, this is tough. I mean, I thought about this beforehand.
Yeah.
But now after hearing that, I'm trying to change my answer a little bit.
Anyone who knows you is going to crack up at that, because they'll know how accurate it is.
I feel like you would be more like, I would honestly say when I initially thought about my answer on this, I would say like an oak tree. And I know that sounds, when it comes off, like, oh, come on, man. Oak trees,
I like oak trees.
Are extremely resilient to anything and everything. They push anything and everything out of their way. They do what they need to do to get stuff done.
I like doing that in business.
And that's exactly you.
An oak tree. I'll take an oak tree.
I mean, and they're stately.
Yeah.
So
I love a good oak tree.
Yeah.
I just had one fall, which hopefully that's not on.
Well, that's not you. So,
but normally they stay up strong. Well, brother, thank you so much for doing this, and man, I can't wait to launch this. I know a lot of people who want to hear this who know us. So
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Garrett Richardson with Landscape Resources. Thank you again, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.